A white SUV sat across my driveway like a door. I took one photo, called the tow company, and ate half my fries while the driver hooked it up. 20 minutes later, the SUV was gone and my concrete was clear. An hour after that, my neighbor Rick pounded on my door with two people shouting behind him. I opened the door and said one sentence. "You told me it wasn't a big deal, so I treated it like it wasn't a big deal." Then I closed the door and went back to my dinner. That was the night everything turned. But it did not start there. Rick had been in the house next door for 8 months. He arrived with a big laugh and a habit of letting visitors park wherever they wanted. The first time I found a car in my driveway, I thought it was a mistake. I waited. He walked out holding a paper plate, pointed his thumb over his shoulder, and said the car would be a sec. I parked on the street and carried my bag through the wet grass. It was not worth a fight. New neighbor, new learning curve. I let it go. It kept happening. Different cars, same shrug. If his driveway was full, mine became overflow. When I spoke up at the fence, he would nod, say he understood, and the next weekend a friend's truck would sit on my concrete while they watched a game. If I pressed, he gave me a small smile that said I was making a fuss. He had a way of saying soon that stretched 2 hours long. I work 12-hour shifts at the hospital 3 days a week. Most weeks, I do not have patience to circle the block after midnight because someone else decided my driveway was spare storage. I put 2 orange cones at the top of the drive. Someone moved them, parked anyway, and set the cones neatly against my hedge. I started keeping notes. Date, time, car color, a single line. Not to build a case, to make sure I was not exaggerating. When someone repeats that something is not a big deal, you begin to check your own memory against a page. The little notebook in the kitchen drawer gave me a steadier mind. The Friday with the white SUV was the last straw. I called. He said it was his in-laws and told me to park on the street. It was not a big deal. I made the tow call, the truck came, and that was that. They paid close to $300 to retrieve the car. My driveway has been clear ever since. It would have ended there if Rick had stopped at parking. He did not. The parking was only one face of a bigger problem. He believed rules were for people who did not have the energy to argue. He had a lot of energy to argue. The rest of us had jobs and sleep to keep. Noise came next. At first, it was music past midnight on warm weekends. Then it was a leaf blower at dawn, 2 Saturdays in a row. He ran the blower like he was racing time, right up to the property line, and shot a stripe of leaves into my yard. We live in a small cul-de-sac where sound bounces. Many cities restrict blower hours and call out how loud they are. The details vary, but not early mornings is common sense and often the rule. On the 3rd Saturday of the month, he started the blower at 6:40 a.m. I heard it through the closed windows. I stood at my back door and watched him send a wave of clippings into the street. Nina came into the kitchen and looked at me. I shook my head. I was not going to start a yard debate before coffee. I raked the line back after he finished and wrote the time in my notebook. Trash showed up where it should not. Twice my can was dragged off the curb and left half blocking the lane. Once a Tide bag sat on my grass that was not ours. I carried it to the bin and washed my hands. A week later, my mailbox flag was bent. I straightened it. I did not knock on his door. I did not text. I did not feed the small pokes he wanted me to notice. I made my notes and kept going. The other neighbors started to talk in low voices by the mailboxes. Mrs. Patel, who is retired and walks every morning, said his guests drove too fast around the circle and cut close to the curb where kids ride scooters. The young couple across from him said they had to knock one night at 1 a.m. because bass from a portable speaker made their baby cry. Rick told them it was a birthday and to relax. A man 3 houses down said he found empty beer bottles in his shrubs the morning after one of Rick's garage nights. Everyone had a small story. Each one by itself was small. Together they drew a picture we all knew well. One afternoon, the mail carrier could not get close to the cluster box because a pickup had parked too tight to the curb. He left a yellow notice. The notice said the approach to the mailboxes must be kept clear or delivery could be suspended. It was plain language and the rule is real. Postal policy lets carriers skip a box when the approach is blocked or unsafe. That same week, a guest parked partly in front of the fire hydrant on the corner. We all saw it in our windows. It was a short visit, but short visits are when fires start. A lot of states keep the 15-foot rule around hydrants for a reason. We held our regular homeowners association meeting in the little room by the pool. I do not love HOA meetings, but I went. The president went through landscaping, dues, and a note about pool keys. Then I raised my hand and said I wanted to talk about driveway access, hydrants, and mailbox clearance. I did not say Rick's name. I did not need to. The neighbors nodded. The president reminded everyone to be considerate and said the board would send a courtesy notice about parking, noise after 10 p.m., and blower hours. He also said, without drama, that blocking a driveway was grounds for immediate towing under city rules and that the board would support any owner who did so. I kept my face neutral and looked down at the agenda. He did not say my name either. He did not need to. Rick sat in the back and scrolled his phone. On his way out, he caught my eye and shook his head like I had broken some pact. I did not stop him. I went home and put the agenda in my folder with the tow receipt and the mailbox notice. A few days later, it rained hard. The next morning, our street was thick with leaves and the small branches that snap in summer storms. Around 7 a.m., the blower started again. I watched him walk the edge and blow wet piles into the gutter that feeds the storm drain. He glanced at my window and pushed a heavy clump into the shallow dip at the corner. The drain was already slow. In heavy rain, that corner can flood a little and creep toward Mrs. Patel's front step. I put on my jacket, walked out, and moved the pile with a rake so the drain could catch up. I did not look at him. I wrote the time down when I went back inside. Then came the dog. It is a good dog with bad guidance. They let him out off-leash to roam the circle. He is friendly and likes to visit porches. He also leaves gifts in front yards and on the strip by the mailbox. The couple across the street caught Rick's brother laughing about it with a friend. "He likes your lawn," the brother said. "They cleaned it up that time." A day later, we found a new pile by our hedge. I took a bag out, did the job, and put a note in my book. If you looked at my notebook, you would think I was petty. But the notebook kept me from shouting. It told me I was not just tired and cranky. It told me there was a pattern. Patterns are what matter. The second major turn happened on a Sunday around dusk. A short-term rental on the next block threw a party that rolled our way. Cars lined both sides, with 2 SUVs idling nose to tail near the corner. The one with out-of-state plates slid half an axle into my driveway while its driver stared at a phone map. I walked out and pointed at the street. He reversed and parked legally down the road. Then I noticed something else. A black sedan had tucked in front of the hydrant again. Same angle, same lazy stagger into the red zone. I took a photo and sent it to our HOA address with the time. I did not call anyone. I do not chase cars around corners. The next day, a big stencil of "No Parking" showed up around the curb, bright and fresh. I do not know who called the city. I did not ask. I assumed the paint would do what words could not. The third major turn was a row of small things that landed in 1 week and proved my point to anyone still unsure. Monday night, base after 10 p.m. with the garage door open. Tuesday, a loose bag of trash blew across the circle and tore under Mrs. Patel's tires. Wednesday, a guest parked close enough to the mailbox cluster that the carrier skipped 3 boxes, including Rick's. The yellow card came again. Thursday morning, the blower at 6:55. Friday, 2 beer bottles laid gently on the strip of grass by my sidewalk like offerings. I did not knock O. I did not text. I did not drop a note in his mailbox. I did not want a personal fight. I wanted a public line. I emailed our HOA president and said that a pattern existed and that I would attend the next meeting. I also wrote that I would call for a tow any time my driveway was blocked without debate and that I would support any neighbor who did the same. Then I went outside and cleaned the bottles. The next meeting drew more chairs than usual. People do show up when they think their lives might get easier. The president opened with a summary. He said we had repeated issues with parking, mailbox access, blower hours, and noise. He said the board had sent 2 courtesy notices and 3 individual reminders. He said if it continued, the board would begin fines under the covenants. He said the board preferred people fix problems before they needed fines. He also said the board had invited a community officer from the city to answer general questions about noise and parking. The officer was small, calm, and straightforward. She said the city handles noise complaints and that reasonable hours are not just opinions, they are set in local rules. She said they prefer people sort things out themselves, but will write citations for repeated violations. She said blocking a driveway is grounds for towing and that the city does not intervene in the tow, it is between the property owner and the tow company. She said carriers can skip mailboxes if they are blocked or unsafe. She did not lecture. She answered questions with short sentences. It helped. People believe a steady voice faster than a loud one. Rick raised his hand. He said the street was tight and that everyone should relax. He said he does not control where his guests park. He said towing was extreme. The officer said evenly that each property owner controls whether a car sits across their driveway. The president moved to the next item. The room stayed quiet in that way that tells you most people are done with the debate. Rick did not look at me on his way out. I did not look at him. He went home fast and slammed his screen door loud enough to echo. I walked home slow and slept well. Things calmed for a while. His guests started to park on the main road and walk in. The blower did not start before 8. The dog stayed on a leash. The bass dropped off at 10. It felt like we had turned a corner. Then the summer holiday weekend arrived, and old habits came back for one more run. It started with fireworks 2 nights before the actual holiday. A few small ones in the street, then larger ones in a driveway. I watched from our porch with my arms folded and a hose coiled by the side, not to be dramatic, just because I know how dry grass moves. Several of us texted each other. No one called anyone. It ended early. The next night, the same thing, but with a crowd. Someone lit a box near the mailbox cluster. Sparks hit the top of the plastic units. The crowd laughed. I went inside, wrote the time and the location in my notebook, and went to bed with earplugs. The morning brought a black smudge on the side of the mailboxes. Mr. Lopez, our carrier, shook his head and rubbed at it with his sleeve. He left a 3rd yellow card, reminding us to keep the approach clear and safe. I took a photo and sent it to the HOA address for the record. I went to work and tried to stop thinking like a hall monitor. The holiday itself was quieter. Rick's in-laws came over and parked legally down the block. They carried a pie and waved. I waved back. I do not hold grudges if the behavior stops. I care about actions more than apologies. The days got hot. People kept to their houses. One Wednesday, just past noon, a car I did not recognize pulled into my driveway and sat idling with the air on. I walked out and stood 5 feet away. A teenage boy stared at his phone and did not look up. I said through his closed window, clear and slow, that he needed to move. He rolled the window 2 inches and said he was waiting for Rick. I said, again clear and slow, that this was my driveway and he needed to move. He did not add anything. I did not raise my voice. I went back inside and added one more line to the notebook. That afternoon, Rick texted me for the first time since the tow. He wrote, "He's just a kid, could have waited him out." I did not reply. Nina told me to block his number. I did N. The world got quieter by one more notch. By late summer, we had a new norm. Rick's house was still busy, but the edges were trimmed. The dog stayed on leash. The blower started later. The base cut off at 10. The cars stayed off my concrete. Then the next real conflict arrived from a new angle I did not see coming: construction. Rick started a deck project with a friend. They ordered lumber and had it dropped half across the sidewalk. They used the street as a staging area for sawhorses. They set a compressor near the curb and ran it into the evening. The hammer gun popped and hissed for hours. I closed my windows and turned on a fan. The young couple across from them tried to get their stroller around the lumber and had to step into the lane. Mrs. Patel shook her head on her morning walk. The lumber sat there for 3 days. On the 4th day, the HOA president left a printed notice on Rick's door about keeping sidewalks clear and storing materials on his property. That afternoon, the lumber moved into his yard. The next day, a dumpster appeared in the street without cones or a permit sign. The president sighed out loud when he saw it. He left another notice. 2 days later, the dumpster was gone. The deck got built. It looks fine. None of us care what it looks like. We care that the sidewalk is open. By fall, the neighborhood had something we had not had in a while: a clear feeling that rules would be followed more often than not. It did not come from a big speech or a blow-up. It came from a toe, a folder with a few pieces of paper, steady notes, and a group that chose the same answer enough times that the question got boring. Rick tested the line now and then. He would start the blower at 7:30 a.m. and watch my window. He would push a thin stripe of clippings to the curb and then sweep them up when he saw Mrs. Patel watching. He would joke to another neighbor about driveway cops. The jokes faded when no one laughed. We had one more public turn in early winter. The HOA scheduled a neighbors and safety night with the community officer again. The room was full. The officer talked about simple steps. She said to document, to act once cleanly, and to avoid getting pulled into long driveway arguments that never end well. She answered a question about hydrants and said the 15-foot distance is common and makes the difference in a fire. She mentioned that carriers can and do skip blocked mailboxes because they have schedules and safety rules too. She reminded people that leaf blowers have restricted hours in many cities and to check local rules. And she said the quiet part out loud: most problems go away when people know the neighborhood will not bend for one person's habits. At the end, the HOA president read a short statement. He said repeated issues with one address had improved after clear action. He thanked the affected owner for handling it without drama. People clapped once, brief and polite. I did not stand. I did not wave. I picked up a cookie for Nina and walked home. I expected Rick to be angry. Instead, he nodded at me in the driveway the next day and asked how the hospital was going. I said work was steady. He said his deck took longer than he thought. I said that is how projects go. We both stood there for a moment, two people who had pushed against each other for months and were tired of it. Then we went inside. Winter softened the street. Fewer visitors, fewer late nights, more quiet. On a Sunday morning in January, I shoveled my driveway and noticed that Rick had done his too, clean to the concrete. He made a neat path across the sidewalk. He even cleared the strip by the mailbox. He did not say anything about it. I did not either. I waved B. He waved back. Spring brought the usual pollen and the return of yard work. The blower came back, but after 8. He started raking more and blowing less. He bagged his clippings. He kept them on his side. The dog came out on a leash, did his business in the strip near their drive, and went back in. He did not visit porches anymore. Mrs. Patel waved at him. He waved back. In late spring, a moving van squeezed into the circle to unload a new family. They blocked the mailbox for 20 minutes without realizing. When they saw Mr. Lopez pull in, they hustled the van out of the way and apologized. Mr. Lopez smiled. He is patient when people try. He cares when people do not. He told me once that neat blocks run on the same fuel as neat clinics, people doing small things on time without being asked. By summer, I stopped writing in the notebook. I left it in the drawer and put a pen on top just in case. I still had my folder with the tow receipt, the HOA agendas, and the yellow cards. It sits with my tax files. I hope I never need it again. If you asked me what changed Rick, I would say it was not the tow alone. It was the tow. The HOA meeting with a calm officer, the neighbor who spoke up about the baby, the mailbox cards that meant slow mail for him too, the hydrant paint that removed his favorite corner, the dumpster notice, and the steady feeling that 3 or 4 of us would act the same way every time. Once he understood consistency, he adjusted to it. People adjust to pressure or they leave. He adjusted. A year after the SUV tow, Rick's in-laws came for dinner and parked on the main road. They carried a pie across the lawn and waved at us from a distance. We waved back. I sat on the porch with Nina and ate takeout from the place downtown. I pulled straight into my driveway that night without thinking about it. It felt ordinary. Ordinary is what I wanted all along. There is no grand ending to this story because most neighborhood problems do not have grand endings. They end with a few clean actions and then a lot of normal days. My driveway is open. The mailboxes are clear. The hydrant is bright and unblocked. The dog is on a leash. The blower starts later. The base shuts off at 10. The street feels like it belongs to the people who live on it, not to one person's plans. I did not ruin anyone's life. I did not try to. I matched the act to a fair result. I used rules we all live with. I did it once, clearly, and then I stayed quiet and steady while the neighborhood filled in behind me. If you are dealing with a neighbor like Rick, I will not tell you to call a tow truck first. I will tell you to know your line, write it down in simple words, act once when it is crossed, and avoid turning yourself into a character in someone else's show. Keep records for your own sanity, not for a fight. Use the supports that already exist: an HOA agenda, a calm city officer, a patient mail carrier, paint on a curb. None of those are dramatic. All of them work. The last time Rick and I spoke, it was about nothing. He asked if I had a spare ladder for a morning. I did, and he brought it back that afternoon without a scratch. We nodded. That was enough. The white SUV never returned to my driveway. My cones stay in the garage, dusty. On Fridays after late shifts, I turn into the cul-de-sac, see my clear concrete under the street lamp, and pull in. I carry my dinner inside, set down my keys, and sit. The house is quiet. The street is quiet. That is the whole point. A few months later, a new wrinkle arrived and resolved the same way. A friend of Rick's started parking with 2 wheels on the sidewalk when he visited, pinching the path for strollers and walkers. I saw Mrs. Patel step into the street to get around. I took a photo and sent it to the HOA address, EPB. The president sent a short reminder about keeping sidewalks clear. It stopped. No speeches, no fights. Just a line stated once, and a behavior that ended. At our summer block cookout, people brought chairs and folding tables into the circle. Someone set up a cornhole board. Kids chalked the pavement. Rick came out with a cooler and stayed mostly in his yard. When the food table ran low, he walked over with a tray of sliced watermelon and set it down without comment. Later, when it was time to wrap up, he helped move the tables back. No one mentioned the SUV. No one mentioned the tow. We had fun. We cleaned up. We went inside. The night ended with what I want from every night on this street. Cars parked where they should be. Hydrant clear. Mailbox approach open. Music turned down. People asleep. Nothing dramatic. Just a block that knows how to live together. That is the story. Not fancy, not loud. Firm where it needed to be. Quiet afterwards. It started with a tow and ended with a steady neighborhood. That is enough for me.